thank you so much for joining. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes, give or take, just doing two things. I think one is to this morning we announced a partnership with you, Bart, and your team, 512 Financial, Santim, getting together to partner to create value for our respective customers to help them manage their cash and cash flow better. So we'll talk about that. And then really the bulk of our time, what we wanted to do is to spend time, digging into a particular mutual customer of ours and how the Santim solution partnered with 512 Financial to create, an AR turnaround, for them, some of the challenges that they had, their collections, and how we work with them to essentially sort of transform collections. If there's interest and if there's time, what we'd like to also do is to spend some time walking through the product, if we can, if there's interest. But that's really the goal of the next half an hour or so. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and then get some introductions going, and then we'll dive right into the case study. All cool?
Sounds great.
And Bart and Amber, I know that you guys are in Texas. I hope you're safe and sound and warm, and the ice and the snow in Austin is not impacting you too much.
Yeah, the warm part's challenging for us down here, but yeah, the ice is starting to melt after about 48 hours or so of just drizzle and ice. So good to get back to normal Texas weather here in the next couple of days.
For sure.
Well, hopefully, maybe we'll get the conversation get really heated here, and we'll say controversial things to each other.
There you go.
And that'll keep us warm. And I want nothing more than the sweat to flow from our respective brows. Anyway, so as I said, what we want to do is to talk about one of your clients, accounts receivable, and how we were able to release a bunch of cash that was trapped on their balance sheet in the receivables. More on that in a second. But overall, our thought is to share a few words about our respective companies, dive into the case study, and like I said, also then get into a little bit about the Santim solution that goes a little bit beyond what accounts receivable is. So I'm going to actually turn it over to you, Bart and Amber, to tell us a little bit about 512, what you do, how you found us, and all that, and your journey to getting to putting us in front of your customers.
Yeah. So real quick on us, we're an outsourced accounting services firm. So we've got all our folks in the Texas area, Austin, Houston, and Dallas. And we support small to mid-sized businesses with fractional staff accountants, controllers, CFOs, HR personnel, et cetera. And a big part of the way that we do that in terms of providing fractional resources in place of what could sometimes be considered a full-time role is with technology. And so we're always on the look for solid technology that can help make our lives easier, make our clients' lives easier by optimizing and making things as efficient and as effective as possible. And one of the ways, of course, to do that is around the cash flow management and AR specifically. And Amber was actually the one who found Santim, and so I can let her introduce herself and talk about kind of how she found it.
Sure. So I'm a fractional staff accounting consultant with 512, and my primary focus with my clients is orders to cash. And I have a goal every quarter around cash flow improvement. And since we're fractional, the best way to help improve companies' cash flow improvement is to implement tools that help us do that. And one of our clients actually uses a different AR automation tool, but we had a contact there that used to work there, and he since moved over to Santim, and that's how we got introduced to Santim, was through that former AR collection tool contact. And it turned out that with Santim, you got a better tool, in my opinion, easier to use than the other one, and much better in terms of cost effectiveness for like these mid-sized software companies. So we really were looking forward to implementing it there and seeing if it could make a difference, and it really has.
So more on that in a second, but I've heard you say, Bart, that before you spring unsuspecting customers on new tools, it's always a good idea to vet it yourself. And to some extent, once Amber maybe made you aware of the product, you kind of kicked the tires and kicked us around a little bit, and then tell us, like, you use Sunteam internally as well.
We do, yeah. So exactly to your point, I was excited about the concept of the partnership, but yeah, I don't want to send our customers off to sign up for a tool that I don't know how to use or how well it works. And so we do use it internally for 512 Financial. We're fortunate that we don't have a receivables concern, and so although we have leveraged that functionality, there's not a big need there. The part that I've appreciated is the cash flow forecasting. And, it's funny, obviously, part of our role as fractional CFOs is around financial modeling. And we've got our Excel templates that are, very detailed and take a lot of time to maintain. And within a few weeks of using Sunteam and it, evaluating the patterns from a payables flow perspective, receivables flow perspective, we could look at the short-term cash forecast and really it was extremely comparable to our financial model that we use in Excel. So in a lot less time and effort to do so. So yeah, I really appreciated using it internally, and that gave me the confidence and comfort to try to bring it to our clients.
Thank you. And my name is BC Krishna. I'm the founder and CEO of Sunteam. Obviously, as you know by now, we provide a suite of cash management solutions to small and mid-sized businesses. We've talked already about ARR and cash flow forecasting. A little later on, we'll also talk about how we include in our suite an accounts payable solution. And it's our belief that these major components, accounts payable, accounts receivable, cash forecasting, and also access to credit and liquidity when you need it, all put together are necessary for a business to really understand and manage and control their cash flow. That's what we're about. And that's what our partnership, with 512 Financial is about. And hopefully we'll have many more customers that, can sing the same praises and have the same positive outcomes as we're about to share with you now. And I'm going to flip through a couple of slides, but mostly lean on you, Amber, if you don't mind providing the sort of commentary around, this. I'm very strongly tempted to spring the name of the company onto everybody here, but, we will not do that out of respect for, our partner. They have requested that this be presented in an anonymized fashion. And so we've kind of, anonymized it, is for lack of a better term. But go ahead, Amber. I think I'm here in a supporting capacity to flip slides and talk to anything that you want me to talk to.
Sure, sounds good. So the client that we wanted to implement Sunteam with was really struggling with some collections. They are a software company that provides process management and software management for very complex manufacturers. So we're talking aircrafts and anything that requires like lots of pieces and hundreds of suppliers. So their ARR tends to stay around 8 to 10 million. And at the end of Q4 2022, they were actually up towards 11 million in ARR. They grew from about 55 to about 65, so 60 plus people since I have been on that client. And when I joined them in Q2 of 2022, they were just massively behind in collections. 50% of their entire AR was in what we call trapped cash, which is greater than 30 days past due. So for a company that does over 10 million in ARR every year, half of that was stuck in receivables, and they were experiencing some rapid growth both in the headcount and company, plus trying to grow the number of customers they have. And so it's hard to focus on getting money from the new customers when you're chasing money from your existing customers.
And so this chart, which we put together with you, kind of tries to describe a picture that's both before and after, right? You mentioned, in December of 2021, when you joined them, their collections effectiveness was in the single digits. Their days past due were 60 days on average. So, tell us a little bit about what happened from December through, let's say, June of that year.
So in December,
Because, sorry to interrupt you, because it looks as though they were making good progress here. It looks as though, yeah.
They did make some. So Q4 tends to be a big renewal timeframe for this customer. They do about 40% of all of their annual renewals in November and December. And so you see this massive uptick in receivables, especially as receivables become past due into Q1. And in Q1 of 2022, they did bring on one accounting resource, but that person was not focused on collections. Like, they had to be focused on collections because there was nobody else, but they were also focused on other finance duties as well. They were a CFO, but they were a fractional CFO and or controller rather. And so while she was creating some effectiveness by just reaching out to folks, they were still slipping further and further behind. She just couldn't chase every invoice. So when I joined the company, they added another fractional resource whose main focus was collections. So that created some effectiveness in collecting there, but I was like, okay, I'm still only one person. So I need to get a tool that is going to automatically send notifications, automatically send copies of invoices, automatically send statements, that take some of the legwork out of some of the folks who just need reminders. So I'm sorry
to interrupt you. This is an important point, right? It's not like these suppliers were, low on cash or something like that. They had processes that were perhaps not as effective. They needed to be goosed from time to time to say, hey, listen, you have a responsibility to pay me. I'm just going to remind you to pay me. Absolutely. And that was really the thing that made the difference.
Absolutely. I have found in collections that folks will get away with whatever you'll let them get away with, right? If they've had net 30 and they know that you won't bug them, then they'll wait till 30 days past due to pay an invoice. So the greasy,
case in point, I do this.
Yeah. that gets into another part of cash flow optimization, right? But so when you grease the wheels and start making a lot of noise for these clients in so much as just reminders, constant reminders, and the Centime cadences, email reminders and statement reminders do a lot of that for me. It also gives me some KPIs and some better reporting so I can see where the troublemakers are. And I can go after the troublemakers in a more targeted fashion rather than just running down the list of who owes us money. So, exactly. So much of what this client was doing was just on reports, terrible reports really, out of QuickBooks, and trying to do some Excel formatting and get it into a way we could use it and to target some of these really late folks. And that was taking so much time, so many hours to format this thing and take notes, when now I have a tool that I can do all of it in one place, and I don't have to do any additional reporting during our weekly finance meetings. We run through collections very quickly. So it's really increased both the effectiveness of getting customers to pay, but also my effectiveness in how I do my job, in that I can more appropriately report and more appropriately target those that need it, so that I'm not wasting my time. And
in a minute, I'm going to dive, actually, just since you mentioned it, I think it might be worthwhile to just actually launch the solution and walk through it. Obviously, we won't do it in the context of this particular client, but we'll show some, sample data to give people a feel for what that is. But I want to highlight this, right? This is really what happened. I think that it was around this sort of September timeframe of 2022 that you implemented Centime. And this line that you see, the yellow line, is the number of suppliers that you are starting to send out these automated cadences and reminders to. And concurrent with that, you can also see that the red line, which is the days past due, dropping. I think what you're running an average of just about 6 or 7 days past due now. And the collections effectiveness index, right into the, almost 80% range. So, I mean, these are the KPIs and metrics I think that people, will tell you are indicative of the success and the results that you've had. But the real point is this, right? You mentioned trapped cash. And, we kind of tried to analyze exactly what that meant. If 50%, of a company's ARR is trapped, then it's very meaningful from a working capital standpoint. And just in that one quarter alone, I think that, we estimated that about $900,000 of cash was being released, and then, corresponded roughly on that same run rate to about a $2.3 million annual benefit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think this stat to me is really meaningful. Just if you think about, a company that's in that, call it 10 for the sake of a round number, a quarter of that is getting optimized from a net working capital perspective. I mean, it just really means a lot for what you can do from a hiring perspective, from a predictiveness of where your cash will be. And so I think this is something that at least I, as someone who either is running a company at 512 or is running a finance team at various clients, like this kind of jumps out in personally.
And so, yeah, I mean, what I'm going to do is to, make the point, of course, that, we said this at the top, but AR is a component of the cash control lifecycle. And what you're able to effectively do is to shorten DSOs, release trapped cash. But that's not the only way to, put more cash on the balance sheet to enhance your working capital picture, right? Which is the flip side of it. What we also already discussed is that imagine that, you had a way to actually not delay, to delay payments in a more strategic fashion, right? So who do you pay? When do you pay? How much do you pay? What instrument do you use to make the payment? How do you decide, which payments to make based on using your cash flow as context, right? This is another element of that. So accounts payable is as important, I think, and certainly please weigh in as a way to manage the cash control lifecycle as accounts receivable. And the third point is, of course, cash forecasting ties the two together, right? Cash forecasting actually tells you what's going to happen, certainly from a recurring payment standpoint, but also your discretionary AP payments, what's the AR that's coming in. It gives you sort of a picture into your inflows and outflows. And if you're the kind of business that can get to a happy place by just shortening DSOs and lengthening DPOs, great. But sometimes you do need some additional capital, to just really tide over the timing differences between AP and AR. That's another element of what, we have tried to do at Santim. And then finally, of course, the KPIs that you mentioned, Amber, who is doing what, when, and how do I ensure that I can use those KPIs to sort of focus on certain people? This set of things taken together is what we do at Santim. It's a cash management platform that covers these 4 or 5 different areas. And since we have a few minutes, what I'd like to do is to go back, to your narrative, Amber, and jump into the product and talk a little bit about how the AR solution works. And then maybe you can kind of provide some commentary on the components that are, very, very effective for you.
Sure.
So please bear with me, and I'll do the song and dance here with the waiting for the 2-factor code, and hopefully it shows up and all that. Please, punch in your questions into the webinar if you have them. Including Santim people who want to put in contrived questions, which is always a key feature of a webinar.
Of course.
All right, so what I'm going to do is to switch to a sandbox. And so this is the Santim application that has 4 different modules. Like I said, forecasting, KPIs, AP, and AR. I think you spend your time in the AR module, right? For the most part, Amber?
Yes.
So you want to walk us through this?
So The first thing, after I go and I check on who's actually paid for the whatever day I'm doing collections on or for the week, I usually start at the back. So I'll start with that bucket, and I use the buckets at the top more often than I use some other features, but I really started that 120-day plus bucket. In the sandbox, we don't have anybody in there, but that's usually where I start. Those are our biggest troublemakers, are back there in 90 and 120 days past due. Those are people who, there are probably reasons why those are past due. So we start focusing there, start figuring out how we can assist them in getting what they need to pay us. Then we look back at the 60 to 90 day past due. We start hitting up folks that we don't want to slip into that 90-day bucket and start identifying where there could be problems. And then in the folks that are more current, that 1 to 30 and 30 to 60 day past due, those folks are just getting their reminders.
And so go ahead. Yeah.
So we go in and we have at this particular client an assumption that all customers are going to be slow payers. So we've actually created a slow payer cadence that we've assigned to everyone. And if you look at the reminder campaigns, in slow payers. So we're getting, this looks a little bit different than what we use, but
this is just the standard in the sandbox.
Reminders. You're getting reminders. It looks like 42 days before the invoice is due, and then it walks its way down 7 days until you get to the due date, and you get a reminder that now your invoice is due, and then you start getting your past due reminders every 7 days. And then it looks like you have an alert there on 21 days. So you've got some additional internal notifications, right? So somebody within the company now is getting an automated message from Centime saying, these folks are now 21 days past due. And there's usually a task or an action item within that. They're going to call somebody, they're going to escalate that to their CSM or to their AE and try to start figuring out how come they've not paid yet, and how can we keep them from slipping into that 30-day past due bucket.
Exactly. And like, just to build on what you were saying, these are just for everybody, like, these are basically events that are triggered at this time frame, right? 7 days before the due date, 14 days before the due date, reminders essentially that get triggered. And do you customize these reminders?
We do. We have reminders that they're a little bit different for folks who are getting their your invoices coming due reminders, and they vary in their responses, right? So you're getting this is a friendly reminder that your invoice is coming due, and then as they slip into past due, they become a little bit more poignant, a little bit more, your invoice is this many days past due, please respond with an estimated payment date. Do
you have any really harsh reminders? Call them names and things?
No. No, I'm kind of known for being politely rude.
Iron fist in the velvet glove.
So and then with our the subject lines, we do a little bit different. There's a toggle in there that you can add the customer's name, so we prefer to have the customer's name in there versus our name, little things like that. So and then you can change the wording there too. So and then also what's nice about the campaigns is you can also have it include, I believe you can also have it include a copy of the invoice.
Yes, exactly. I think that, you have the invoice included and a payment link, right? In case.
Yes, if you have the Centime Pay turned on, you can also have the payment link there where they can pay with other ACH or credit card.
Exactly. Good stuff. And then the other area where I think you said that you spend time is in the KPI module. Relating to
BC, real quick, I just saw one question in here that I don't know if probably either of you can answer better than me, but the question was, how often does Centime pull data from QuickBooks, so that you're not sending a reminder to someone who maybe just had a payment marked as paid earlier today or yesterday or something like that?
Yeah, it's a near real-time sync. Somebody correct me, but I think it's like every hour that we pull data. But it's also the case that, you can do this on demand. So, you see this little sync button. The last time that it synced was, at this time, But if you wanted to, you can go in and sort of, sync data. In the sandbox, we have a slightly different history, but effectively what ends up happening is that you kind of sync data. You can sync data on demand, but I believe that the default is that it syncs every hour.
Typically, my process is I don't attempt collections until I've done cash application, and I do that 2 or 3 times a week. So there are some that get kind of notifications before the payment, before we've recognized their payment. But once we process their payment in our ERP, it syncs over, and I'll often, when I do Cash App, go and run the sync manually as well. So I will push that button and tell it to sync. That way I can go in and get a better picture of what our trapped cash looks like.
And then here, I think this is another area where you do spend time, right? You were mentioning that, this is what we're looking at here are the KPIs associated with the historical performance. And so basically this graph, I think, as you can imagine, indicates, by month for the last, last quarter in this case we've chosen, but you can choose any period you wish, what the collections performance was. And there's some basic metrics here in terms of collections effectiveness, percentage overdue, DSO, days past, average days past due, and the turnover ratio. And if you wanted to sort of, really measure how you're doing against other quarters, so for example, I can add another time period and say like, quarter to date, how am I doing? I can get a sense for like how I'm performing. So my DSOs in the sandbox data, it looks like they're up 21 days. Average days past due, essentially, some metrics that give you a sense for how you're performing. And then this is, I think, this is also where you were, Amber, I think you were saying that you spent some time.
Yes, so I like looking at the different buckets. We report a little bit differently in terms of the graph, but the graph itself shows basically the same thing, which is what are our total collections and how much of those total collections is in each of those past due buckets, right? So we like to see those on time green areas like really, really high, and of course those blue and red areas as low as humanly possible. And we do track that over time. We like to see where we usually do an 18-month running overview of what that looks like.
And then while we're here, I'd like to also switch to, another component of the solution, which is really complementary and in some ways can feed back and forth between AR and cash flow, which is the cash flow forecast. And so what you see here is, the solution connects with QuickBooks. It pulls historical data, applies some AI, some machine learning, and then builds what is effectively kind of an operational 13-week cash flow forecast over the next, 13 weeks. And you can look at this in different, windows. So right now what we're looking at is essentially the blue line tells you what your closing balance is going to be at the end of every week over the next 6 weeks. The red bars tell you what the reason, why the cash might be going down, which is basically your outflows. And the green bars are your inflows, which is why the cash, for example, is getting pulled up. In essence, one way to think about this in a very simple fashion is to say that, look, if your cash is dropping below what you consider to be your low water mark, and it's dropping because of these receivables, one thing that you could do is, these receivables, being pulled in faster. One of the things that you could do is to sort of go in here and then manage those receivables to sort of do what you need to do to get them to be accelerated. So very simplistically, what I'll tell you is that, pushing these out will increase your cash balance. Pulling these in will increase your cash balance, right? That the cash forecast is a very simple way to then, look at, what's going to happen to your cash, and particularly managing your payables and receivables to impact it. There's different ways in which you can look at your cash. Here's a picture that shows you the cash in more of a traditional way in which, cash is reported, cash flow is reported, from operations, from investing, from financing. But what we also do is to give businesses the ability to group the cash in by these different categories that allow you to track categories of cash that might be really important to you. In this particular case, there's a category called network and security, which is not necessarily a general ledger category, right? It might not be a GL account. GL accounts, as you know, are built with a different purpose in mind. Over time, they may become very complicated, but the way in which you manage your cash might be more based on sort of business relationships. And so here I have 4 or 5 customers that are really important to me that I keep track of in a category that I call network and security, which might be a particular product line. And within each of these, I can go in and look at sort of how cash is flowing in from these customers, historically, and how I'm projecting that it's going to play out over time. And what I can do is to also enhance, for example, and change what that forecast looks like based on changes in my business. Maybe I'm about to change my relationship with this customer. They're going to cancel on me, in which case I'd remove it from my future forecast. Or more happily, it might be that I'm going to enhance my relationship with them and add new transactions, which will also change my forecast. So I'd like to say that simple things should be simple and automated, but somewhat more complex things should be possible, which is the ability to modify your forecast, add new inflows and outflows, so that you can make your cash forecast your own. And then finally, the other component of it that I want to just really mention very, very quickly is the idea that, it's a solution that doesn't just address your, AP and AR, but also helps you manage your payables. So, in as much as you can follow up with your customers on receivables, this is a module that allows you to, bring in your payables, and then, do everything that a, self-respecting accounts payable system should be able to do. Bring in invoices, capture data from those invoices, post those invoices into the general ledger, go through an invoice approval process, and then finally, when you're ready to pay them, pay them using the right control, segregation of duties, dual authority, and then make the payment out to suppliers using, check, ACH, credit card with full remittance detail. And then finally, when that's done, to post the payment back into the GL. And when all of that is being done, of course, to ensure that the cash forecast is updated, with the data that flows out of the payables module. So that's what Santim does, in a very, very rapid run through. And I know we started out with, talking about how accounts receivable helped, automation helped this particular customer. But I want to leave you with this, picture that basically steps back for a second and says, it's not just about AR, it's about cash forecasting, it's AP, working capital, KPIs, that ultimately taken together can do a much better job of, helping a business manage their cash and cash flow. So I think that more or less brings us, to the 30-minute point and to the end of our time together today. Bart, Amber, any closing thoughts?
Only that I'm really happy with the result that I've gotten with Santim, and I'm hopeful that in the future, if I find myself on clients that have cash flow problems or a collections problem, that I can implement it there as well and bring them some of the same success that I've brought to some of my other clients.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Bart, for your partnership and for, working with us to create, this amazing outcome for this particular client. And hopefully there are, 50,000 more like them out there. Not that we wish collections problems on people.
I was going to say, yeah. So the one thing I just want to add real quick is, to your point, BC, that it's about more than that. So we have, to this point, other than using it internally, which has been, for me at least, focused on the cash forecasting. Obviously, this client focused on the AR automation. We have one other client using it today, and it's honestly a pretty simple use case, but it's still extremely helpful, which is just from a transactional perspective, being able to send out links to, to pay via credit card or ACH. When we were doing that out of QuickBooks for this specific client, it was getting caught by spam or junk or various filters on customer email inboxes. And so I kind of, I know that Santim has that functionality. Let's put it in there. And that's, they're smaller transactions, so it's not necessarily creating a massive cash flow problem, but any size, you'd prefer to cash in the door sooner. And so a way to make that easier and get past some of those spam filters is obviously very helpful. So
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I know we didn't really focus that much on the payment acceptance component of the Sunteam AR module. It is a big deal, right? I mean, if you really think about it, and it turns out that you have a way for customers to pay online, it avoids for them the drudgery of having to send out a paper check, right? Which is a painful thing to do. But the other thing that happens within our product, which I think is important to highlight, is that when they do pay online by credit card or by ACH, we post cash automatically. We apply cash against that open receivable, which solves a problem for the AR team. As you know, and Amber, I don't know if you agree, but cash application is a painful thing to do. You got to find the invoice, you got to reconcile the fact that, credit card fees were deducted, by the way, from it. It doesn't match. Now I have to post it. I have to, if I do this right, then I have to adjust the fee so that I post it against the receivable, record the fees separately. Nobody does that stuff, And so you make the adjustment in the general ledger, but really one of the things that we've really tried to do is when you do accept a payment using a credit card, we post the payment in full and then post the fees separately so that it can be properly categorized in the GL as bank fees, as opposed to a discount that's taken on the invoice, which is not the right way to reconcile it, but lacking other ways to do it, that's what people seem to do. It's really a big deal. I'm not an accountant, but these are all things that I read.
No, it is. It makes a big difference. I guess that's part of why I want to bring it up. I think it's maybe a lesser focused on use case. And yeah, there's things like Stripe out there, and we can do it with QuickBooks. But again, in a little bit of time that this client has been using that functionality, it's been very helpful. So we're appreciative of that.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our time together. Thank you again, everybody. I hope we have a chance to do it again. And, again, thank you so much for your partnership and look forward to working with you.